Hi everyone, on today's morning commute I'm going to talk to you about getting the fundamentals of your studio marketing right. So a lot of the time when we start to think about studio marketing, we get kind of caught up in the intricacies and often sort of more advanced techniques, starting to get into social media advertising and search engine optimization and things like that, which is all great and really, really important to do, of course. But it's not of much use, or it's not going to be as effective as those advanced strategies might otherwise be if you don't have the very basic fundamental marketing systems in place for your studio. So I'm going to be doing a series of little videos which kind of touches on all of the key fundamental things you want to make sure are in place for your studio's marketing program before you start to get into more creative or advanced kind of techniques. In today's video, I'm going to talk to you about signage. So signage is kind of one of those fundamental things that rarely actually gets talked about when you look at marketing videos online and things, but it's actually critically important. So the reality is that the majority of your clients are going to be coming from your local area. They either work or live close to your studio, and so it's really important to have visibility in your local area. Now, depending on the location of your studio, you may have decent visibility or you may not. One of the big advantages of being in our industry is we don't necessarily need to pay for prime street frontage, ground floor real estate. In major sort of centres, you can sometimes have a studio that is based on the first floor of a building, which is cheaper rent, which is fantastic, but possibly also less visibility. Likewise, you may also have a studio that's tucked away a little bit back from sort of the main street of a busy commercial or retail sort of shopping centre. Again, it's cheaper rent, which is fantastic, but it does mean your visibility is reduced. The other thing that can sometimes happen in our industry is sometimes your studio, rather than being in a sort of standalone building, might be part of a complex of shops or perhaps even inside a shopping centre. And again, that often means that your opportunities for outside visible signage are a little bit reduced. So the first thing that I want you to think about is, what is your visible signage? Go out and have a look at your current signage. Look at it from the point of view of, someone who's walking down the street near you. Also look at it from the point of view of someone who is driving down the street. So I remember when we were first setting up signage for our studio, when the traffic lights were red and there was no traffic on the road, obviously be aware of safety. You'd sort of duck out into the middle of the road where the cars would be going and have a look at, how visible is your signage? Can people see the information that you need them to see from the angles, and also going at the speed that they're likely to be going at when they're driving, for example, versus walking. So assess your current signage. How well is it working for you? And is there anything that you could do to improve it? So in terms of your actual building signage, make sure the font is large enough to be clearly read from your client's perspective, and at the speed at which they're going to be going past your studio, whether that's walking or driving. Make sure that you have the key information that is essential for them to understand what your business is, what it does, and also how to contact you. So, for example, our studio's name is the Perth Pilates Studio. So if we just have a sign with our studio name, people immediately know what we do. But for example, if I had perhaps a more creative kind of a name that didn't have Pilates or state what we offered as part of the name, it would be really important for me to mention Pilates on my studio signage. And in fact, with a lot of traditional businesses, what you'll actually see is, rather than having the actual business's name first and foremost, they'll actually have what the service is. It'll be vet in great big blue letters, and then the phone number or contact details, and the business name might be a relatively smaller thing. The first thing you want to make sure is that people know what your business is and that it's available to them in the local area. So you want to make sure that your what service you offer is clearly visible, and you also want to make sure that clients can clearly from your signage identify how to contact you if they want more information. So on our signs, for example, we have our phone number, and we also have the details of our website address. So those would be the key things to have on the signage on your building. Consider if there are any additional places where you might add signage on your building. So for example, if you're going to have frosting on your windows for privacy, then that could be a great way. You could integrate some signage, some Pilates or bar images, or some details about your studio into the frosting on the windows, for example. Now that works really well if you have good opportunities for placing signage on your building, but often people are in situations where they don't. So if you don't have the opportunity to place clear signage actually on your building itself, a great alternative would be to use an A-frame sign, which is one of those signs that sits out on the verge or on the footpath outside your business. Be aware with A-frame signs, as with signage on your building, there are often council regulations that may apply. Sometimes you need to get licenses for A-frame signs and things like that. That's certainly the case in our council area. It's not the case in all council areas, but make sure with any signage that you're investing in, make sure you contact your local council before completing a final order on signage to make sure that you meet council requirements, have any approvals or licenses in place that you need to have for them. Again, the same ideas apply with your A-frame signage. The font needs to be large enough for people to be able to easily read as they're going past, and you need to position the sign in a place where it's not only safe for people who are perhaps walking past on the footpath, but also clearly visible. So make sure you take that into account. A couple of other little options for signage on your building, or ways to add extra, create extra buzz sort of from your signage. You can use just a traditional A-frame sign, which has the name or services that your business offers, contact details, and you can also look at having an A-frame sign, like for example, you've seen those businesses where they have an A-frame sign where they put different quotes on each day and things like that. That sort of a sign does take a little bit of extra work to maintain, because you obviously need to keep fresh content and interesting things happening on it, but it can be a great way to get people in the habit of looking out for your business and for your business's sign as they go past, and really taking note of the fact that you're there because there's this funny, entertaining sign that they like to look at every day on their daily commute. The other thing that I've seen used very effectively as far as in-studio or on-studio signage, I should say, goes, would be using the front window space of your studio for additional advertising. So there's a local yoga studio I know of that does this very effectively. They have a large sign in the front door which states next beginners class commences, and they have the date and the time of their next beginners course that's running. And that's a really great way for people to, not only see that they're there, but to see, oh, there's a class time, I'm a bit interested in doing yoga, and already I've just seen that there's a class time that potentially suits me and is coming up, and they've got a deadline, a date when that class is starting, so they have an incentive to actually get in and take action and book in within a certain period of time. So that can be very useful. The other thing you could do is if you're running workshops or events, for example, or you have a special offer, come up with like a colour poster to advertise that event, for example, and have a colour poster, large colour poster up in your front window. That can be a really useful tool. If you're wanting to do graphic design for posters and things like that, then I would suggest, if you don't have a regular graphic designer that you work with, then a really cost-effective way is to come up with the content of what you want on the poster. What's your heading going to be? What's your wording going to be? Send off that plus a copy of your studio logo, your studio colors, and any sort of visual images that it might be appropriate to have on the poster. And you can send that off to a designer on Fiverr, for example, and they can come up with a really good, effective poster design for you quite cost effectively. Or the other thing that we tend to do a lot at our studio is we use Canva, C-A-N-V-A. You can just go to canva.com and you can use their online app in order to come up with really effective graphic design for posters and things like that quite quickly. So that's a great low-cost way to go. The other options that you would want to think about in terms of your signage, which are particularly useful if your studio location isn't so obviously visible, would be, for example, if you're in a studio that's on a back street or away from the main roads, would be to think about signage in your local area that is going to indicate to people that you are present. So for example, I would say if you're on a back street, you may wish to pay for additional signage on on a local bus shelter, for example, something nearby that is on a main street and that will show people clearly where you are. And McDonald's does this really well as an example. That's not exactly from our industry, but when you're in a local area for McDonald's, often you'll see signs, street signs or signs on bus shelters and things like that, which, point to the nearest McDonald's. They've got an arrow and they say how far away the McDonald's is. That's actually really effective, because if people see a sign, just saying, advertising your, Joe Blogs Pilates studio, they might kind of take note that there's a thing, but there's a sign there or an ad, but they won't necessarily register, for example, how close or how nearby your studio is. Whereas if you have an arrow on the sign pointing exactly to where your studio is, then that will make it much more likely, if they're in that local area, that they'll actually, register you're super close to them and available for them to attend classes. Now, in addition, your signage is fantastic, and I'm only going to touch on this very briefly now, but once you've got good signage up, just remember that it doesn't end there. You want to think about what action people are going to take once they see your signs. So, for example, having found your phone number or having found details of your website, and I would really encourage you to put the website on there, because often the website address is easier for people to remember if they're going past than the actual phone number for your business. So, our website is perthpilatesstudio.com, which is kind of logical based on our name, so it's an easy website for people to remember. But once people take that action of either visiting your website or calling your phone, what is going to happen? Do you have someone on the desk who is answering your phone? That's a bit of a luxury in our industry, generally speaking. We can't always afford a full-time receptionist, especially when we're first starting up our business. So do you have someone on your desk answering the phone, or are clients expected to leave a voicemail message? Be aware that many potential new clients who aren't so familiar with your studio will be reluctant to leave voicemail messages. They might want to keep trying to call until they actually get through to a real person, directly. And so that potentially can be something that will, lose you that potential client. If you don't have someone who's on your phones all the time, then what I would really recommend is have a voicemail message that specifies, leave a message and we'll get back to you, but also specifies hours that your reception is staffed and that someone will be available to take calls. Because for the people who are reluctant to leave a phone message, that will often be quite useful. And then the other thing you want to think about is if they take the action of going to your website, how can they progress from there? How easy is it for them to do business with you on your website? And one of the things I'd really strongly encourage you to take advantage of is having an online booking system. So if clients are directed to your website, they can immediately find the information that they're after, okay? There'll be lots more about that in future videos, so I'll look forward to giving you some more detail in that area soon. But for today, go out, take a look, assess what is your studio signage, how well is it currently working for you, and is there anything you can do to improve it right now? Thanks for listening.